In the year 2063, humans' bad treatment of the planet has raised the sea levels to the point where most of Earth is flooded now. Only 2 continents remain, and currently, they're fighting a war over land and resources. In the middle of the sea between both continents, there's a military outpost known as the Sentinel with a crew of 4 soldiers that are starting to grow frustrated. After 2 years of service, their contract ended 3 months ago, yet the relief crew hasn't come to pick them up yet. Food is getting scarce, so during a very stormy night, Cassidy and Sullivan decide to try fishing. Surprisingly, they do well and fill their big net with plenty of catches. Meanwhile, their superior officer Hendricks notices the storm is getting too violent, so he asks Baines to secure the giant explosive that guards the Sentinel. At that moment, the waves begin growing big and violent, affecting the outpost pipelines. Baines rushes to fix them and gets his hand stuck, causing him to struggle underwater for several minutes until he finally can free himself. The next morning, the group discuss how to lower the consumption of their resources while having military rations for breakfast. Baines wonders what happened to the fish and gets angry when he hears they lost them. Afterward, Sullivan does the daily report using the telegraph. He informs the base that there have been no events, and they reply there are no events there either, same as the last few months. Sometime later, Sullivan joins Hendricks outside and after making some jokes about their air dancer, Sullivan looks at the sea with the binoculars. He's shocked to discover a ship is approaching, which Cassidy confirms when she checks the radar. Sullivan gets very happy because he assumes it's the relief, but Hendricks is wary and orders Baines to bring some weapons in case it's the enemy. Cassidy tries to contact the ship yet gets no answer, so Hendricks decides to give the ship a chance. He hands Sullivan a gun and tells him to take the boat to meet the ship and make sure there aren't any enemies to worry about. Sullivan immediately takes off and approaches the ship, calling out for any possible passengers, but there's still no answer. With his gun out and ready, Sullivan boards the ship and begins investigating, getting more and more upset when he notices the clues. Objects are covered with dirt. Hendricks tries to contact him for a status update, but Sullivan ignores him as he finds 4 bags destined for them. This had been their relief, but something happened to the crew and they disappeared, meaning they missed the chance to go home. Because Sullivan isn't responding, Hendricks assumes he was attacked, so he wants to shoot the ship before it approaches the Sentinel. He asks Cassidy for one of the keys to the explosive, and together with his own key, Hendricks starts activating the explosive, and before he shoots, he tries contacting Sullivan one last time. Thankfully, Sullivan does answer this time, and the attack is canceled. Afterward, Sullivan tows the ship over to the Sentinel, while Hendricks proceeds to investigate the ship. A few hours later, while they have a quick iodine bath, Baines informs the team of all the things he's managed. After the shower, Hendricks checks the ship's navigation history and writes down all the coordinates, which he takes back to the Sentinel to apply them on a map to follow their trip. Meanwhile, Cassidy and Sullivan talk about what the world must be like out there, since they haven't seen it in 2 years. The next morning, Hendricks finds his 3 soldiers suspiciously waiting next to the telegraph. Baines confesses the truth. Hendricks intends to scold them for it, but at that moment, the machine receives an answer. The group gets excited until they read what it says. It's exactly the same message Sullivan sent last night. The next day, Sullivan sneaks into the ship with Baines to help him fix the engine, and together they manage to finish the job. As soon as they come out, they find Hendricks waiting for them, and he orders them to take down the ship to use its parts to fix the Sentinel. He won't allow them to leave because he claims that staying here is their duty. Meanwhile, Sullivan and Baines are starting to wonder if they'll have to fight their boss to get what they want. Their conversation is interrupted by Hendricks, who admits Cassidy has presented a good argument. Since they don't have communications, someone should report to the base. 2 people get to stay and 2 others should go. Sullivan talks to Cassidy in private, trying to convince her to come as well, either by replacing Baines or disobeying Hendricks. He's so desperate to make her happy that he even offers to take her place or stay here with her. But Cassidy snaps and tells him she doesn't love him. She only thought of him as a human necessity. A devastated Sullivan rushes out of the room, and Cassidy breaks down in tears. That night, Sullivan and Baines concentrated on packing. Hendricks gives Sullivan a letter to take to the base. Afterward, Hendricks goes to finish his work on the map and the coordinates, making a shocking discovery. The relief ship has steered away from the Sentinel on purpose, which makes no sense. Getting suspicious, Hendricks rushes to check on Cassidy, but he doesn't dare to say a word. The next morning, the team wakes up hearing the alarm blaring because another of the ship has appeared on the radar. The men rush to get on their positions to defend the Sentinel, and Cassidy tries to get in contact with the ship to no avail. This time, Hendricks refuses to send anyone and orders the team to shoot. But their first bullet misses. While they're getting ready to reload, Cassidy notices their ship is missing at the same time Sullivan and Baines finally get to see it clearly once the fog clears out. But by the time Cassidy comes to warn them, it's too late. Hendricks has his gun out and hits Baines with it. It was Hendricks that put the ship back out last night, and to prove he's being serious, he shoots the air dancer. Baines still refuses to destroy the ship, and Hendricks responds by shooting his ear. So Sullivan takes the cannon and destroys the ship before they lose a life. A furious Baines tries to go after Hendricks, but Cassidy knocks him out first with a fire extinguisher. Afterward, Sullivan and Cassidy lock Hendricks up in the pantry, and Cassidy takes back both keys. A furious Baines later tries to find Hendricks to kill him, and ends up hitting Sullivan when he tries to stop him. Cassidy calms him down with words, but Baines still leaves to get drunk alone and unpack his things, which makes him cry. Sometime later, Cassidy mentions Hendricks needs his iodine bath, but Baines refuses to let him out and announces he quits. Sullivan tells Cassidy that they have no choice but to go through every single channel on the telegraph until they find one is working, and Cassidy takes the chance to confess she hadn't meant what she said about him. She had only wanted him to leave without having to worry about her, but Sullivan is hesitant to accept the excuse. Later in the afternoon, Sullivan takes some food to Hendricks and wonders why he changed his mind. Hendricks shares the information he got from the coordinates. Sullivan doesn't believe him and leaves, locking the door again, while Sullivan spends the rest of his day sending SOS messages to every channel. Baines keeps on drinking and tries to keep himself busy in his workshop. The next morning, Baines finds Cassidy sleeping in the comms room. As he spouts nonsense about missing the future, he attacks Cassidy, making it seem as if he wants to take advantage of her. After some struggle, Cassidy manages to push him away, not realizing Baines has stolen the keys. Then Cassidy goes looking for Sullivan to tell him what happened. But at that moment, Baines' voice can be heard through the speakers announcing that he'll activate the explosive. Sullivan and Cassidy rush back to the comms room and try to calm him down, mentioning his family as a reason to keep living. Baines cries as he steps away from the controls, but after Cassidy takes back the keys, Baines admits he just forgot the last digit of the activation code. Sullivan thinks it's time to let Hendricks out, but Baines has shocking news. He tried to kill him earlier, but when he entered the pantry, Hendricks was gone. Baines confesses his wife had been pregnant, and he never got to meet the baby, which causes Sullivan to easily forgive him for the drunk outburst. Baines shows his gratitude with a hug before getting on the boat. Cassidy is going with him, so Sullivan gives her a gun just in case, and Cassidy thanks him with a kiss. Moments later, Sullivan decides to try fishing again, and when he pulls up the net, he discovers Hendricks' body with a wound on his head, meaning someone killed him, and there truly is a traitor with them. Then that someone killed the relief team and let the ship float away. A few hours later, only Cassidy comes back from the little trip saying that Baines accidentally fell and died while trying to grab some plastic. Sullivan immediately guesses she killed him, and she was the traitor all along. However, he's too scared to say anything yet. The next morning, Cassidy wakes up alone in bed. Sullivan talks to her only through the walkie-talkie, explaining he knows she killed everyone and that she's spying for the enemy, but he won't let her have the explosive. Cassidy then realizes she's missing the keys and runs to the comms room, where she finds Sullivan in the middle of activating the explosive. With Sullivan holding her at gunpoint, Cassidy tries to explain people in her homeland are suffering, and she hates lying to him, but Sullivan doesn't believe her and activates the explosive. However, instead of exploding, the machine displays a funny little phrase that Baines liked to repeat, which makes them realize Baines reprogrammed the explosive, so nobody can use it for destruction. In the end, Sullivan and Cassidy have a little talk. They agree that no matter what side of the war comes, they'll protect the Sentinel together and keep on surviving.